Existentialism stems from a confusion or disorientation as to the absurdity or alienation of life and human nature. Life itself you can be alienated in life, as we talked about during Marx's reading. Alienation occurs in four different steps, as workers are concerned at least. The first step being alienation from a product, the second step being alienation to poverty, and Marx talks about poverty not being economic, but being spiritual or human nature-wise. You would be poor if you have a lot of money but don't have a belonging place in human nature. It's similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The third stage is alienation from others. As workers work harder and harder, they alienate themselves from their other coworkers and the other people around them, and instead just become a cog within the machine. And the fourth form of alienation, or the furthest form of alienation, is that of human nature. When you become alienated from human nature, it's because the more and more we produce, the more and more we become dependent upon what we produce, and we become less dependent on people around us. Another existential theme would be love, which we talked about during Plato's Symposium. One of the first examples given by one of the main speakers is that love is either physical or spiritual, and they're two separate kinds of love. And the character of Socrates within the symposium says that love has to start physical and become spiritual. And what would happen is pure physical infatuation is the first stage, and then you become infatuated with the mind of the other person, and then you become actually in love with the person as a whole. And then the union of us becomes greater than either individual. And a great example of the union being greater than the individual is when people have children and then are sacrificing individual wants and desires for the betterment of the children or the betterment of the union. And another thing that existentialists talk about is death. Now, existentialists say that you need to subjectify things instead of objectifying them, and when you objectify things, you are actually being very narrow-sighted. But existentialists tend to objectify death, as we saw within the thin red line, that you can joke about it, but you can't joke about it if it's been subjectified, because then it's a subject that's happening. So instead you objectify death, and it's a reverse of how you treat people. Instead of objectifying people, you subjectify them and see them as whole beings instead of just one person that's representative of a whole race or a whole group. So death becomes objectified, so it's a very simple thing, and reducing it to an object allows people to tell jokes about it, to relieve the stress that actually happens when people think about death and the fear of dying.